In the middle of this week's parasha, there's an unusual episode, a battle that took place between the kings who ruled the land of Canaan. It's a story which would have not made it into the Torah were it not for the fact that in one of those battles, Lot, the nephew of Avraham, was taken captive. And when Avraham heard that Lot had been captured, Vayarek et Chanichav, he armed his men, 318 of them, and entered the fray, pursuing Lot's abductors almost to Damascus, ultimately freeing him and many others from captivity. And in a fascinating turn of events, had his only recorded exchange with Bera, the evil king of Sodom, an exchange that was filled with tension and was anything but pleasant, and an exchange that, according to Rabbi Yoshever Soloveitchik Zatzal, was one of the greatest disappointments of Avraham Avinu's life. Because before then, Avraham thought that he could have an impact on everyone he encountered. He felt that using the right approach, he could succeed to draw everyone closer to a belief in one God. But after his encounter with Bera, he realized that he couldn't, that the tribes of Canaan, at least some of them, were beyond his abilities to change, which is the reason that just a few sentences later, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reassures him and tells him, Al Tiram, don't worry, because he would be blessed with children who would change the world and inherit the land of Canaan. And while the Chachmei Kabbalah saw in this episode hints of the long and wandering journey of the Jewish people among the nations of the world, there is a fundamental problem that this episode raises, a halachic question of why did Avraham Avinu enter the war? For while the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim, of rescuing captives, is described by our Chazal as a mitzvah rabbah, it's not a mitzvah for which we are required to risk our own lives, to place ourselves in mortal danger, to rescue someone else from captivity. So why did Avraham Avinu go to war to save Lot? According to Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal, the answer is because Avraham Avinu was a yashar. He was a man who lived his life not only with an awareness of God, but with menschlichkeit and decency. He was yashar. He was upright. Or as we might say in Yeshivish, Avraham Avinu didn't know any chochmas. Lot was his nephew, the son of his martyred brother, and Lot was in danger. So Avraham did what was yashar. Or in the words of Rabbi Yaakov, words that I know may sound fantastic, Avraham did not rely merely on the law. Instead, he operated al pi hasechel hayashar. He lived his life guided by common sense, with his God-given insights and understanding driven by simple menschlichkeit, which is the way all of our avot and imahot, all of our patriarchs and matriarchs lived, and which is, according to the Netziv, the reason that all of their stories are included in the Torah, to teach us that being a yashar, an upright person, is an expectation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an expectation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for the entire world. In fact, according to Rabbi Yaakov, that's what the statement Derech Eretz Kadma Torah means. Not that Derech Eretz must precede Torah, but that Derech Eretz did precede Torah. That even before we received the Torah, our ancestors were able to live good lives lives of righteousness and sanctity because of their understanding of Derech Eretz. And the reason I share this thought this week is not only because it is found within the parasha, but for two reasons, none of which have to do with life-threatening situations or wars, but both of which have everything to do with life. The first is to remind you and me that Derech Eretz is not only a powerful character trait, but it's an empowering one as well. It's an empowering trait that guided our patriarchs, and it's the difference between righteousness and greatness. And therefore, we must strive to be not only Jews who follow halakha, but yesharim as well. For only through Derech Eretz and menschlichkeit can we reach, will we reach the ideal that God has set before us. And therefore, when we face difficult decisions, the questions we must ask ourselves are not what we must do, but what should we do? Not merely what the halakha demands, but what HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects as well. And the second reason is to remind you of the obligations each of us has for the other, especially in this election season of unbridled debate and heated rhetoric. For if Avraham Avinu could continue to care for Lot, if he would be willing to risk his life for his nephew who rejected him and who chose to live in the most sinful society that ever existed, shouldn't we be willing at least to maintain relationships, hold on to friendships with those with whom we disagree? Shouldn't we be willing to make room for other opinions, right, left, or center, not necessarily to agree with them, but to treat them with respect as friends, as fellow citizens, as cherished members of our community? Shouldn't we, no matter who we support and what we think, feel the obligation to turn down the heat? Many years ago, Shlomo HaMelech looked out in the world and he sighed, Asa Elokim et Adam Yashar, God created humanity yashar, upright and with menschlichkeit, and yet they vikshu chishvonot rabim. They sought intrigue. I wonder what Shlomo HaMelech would say today about our world, about our society and our community, so blessed and yet so filled with agendas and unnecessary machlokot and politics and intrigue. What we need is a little more yashrut and a little more derech eretz. What we need are the midot of Avraham Avinu. What we need is to learn the lessons that he lived. Shabbat Shalom.